Today we are taking a look at Sony's new flagship Alpha series camera, the Alpha 1. This camera has some pretty impressive specs for the hybrid shooter, but how does it actually perform? What's new, and is it worth its £6,500 price tag? Let's take a look. Sony Alpha 1 is kind of like if Sony took an a7S III, a7R4 and an A9 Mark II and smashed them into one body, which is pretty crazy. Sony were kind enough to lend us this unit for 24 hours to check it out and run it through some tests. This won't be a full review as we've had such a short amount of time with the camera, but we've tried to get as much out of the time we have with it as possible. So let's start off looking at some creative test footage we shot with this crazy little camera. Being in lockdown currently, plus the weather outside being pretty rough during the time we had with the camera, we decided to shoot some test footage with some food and water. We shot in a range of modes and shot both stills and video. Our key light was an Nanlite Forza 500 with a Gemini 1x1 as fill and a Dado Light DLED7 as an edge light. We shot a mix of S-Cinetone as well as S-Slug3. We also shot in a range of formats from 8K to Full HD slow motion. During the entire shoot, the camera didn't skip a beat. Let us know what you think of the footage and the stills in the comments below. The Alpha 1 features a 50.1 megapixel full-frame stacked Exmor RF CMOS sensor with new Bionz XR processors, which have 8 times the processing power of the previous Bionz X. This combination means you can capture stills with a massive resolution of 8640 by 5760 at burst rates of up to 30 frames per second with no blackout. It also means that jello from rolling shutter is well controlled because the sensor readout times are so good. However, you can still see some jello when using the 30 FPS burst mode with the electronic shutter and in video mode. But it's incredible what Sony have achieved with this sensor. When it comes to dynamic range, Sony have stated that you can capture 15 plus stops in video mode and 15 in its stills mode, but we'll take a look at the sensor's performance in a bit. I really hope we get to see this sensor inside of a more video and cinema focused body. It'd be really interesting to see what Sony could pull out of the sensor with a more robust cooling system and faster media type like the AXS cards used on the Venice. The Alpha 1 features a similar autofocus system to the a7S III with a few improvements. It features a hybrid system with 759 phase detection points and 425 contrast detection points, which cover approximately 92% of the imaging area. However, these points are reduced as you go into the APS-C mode. In its stills mode, the camera features human face and eye tracking, as well as animal and bird tracking. However, when shooting video, real-time AF does not work when shooting animals and birds, but does with humans. However, the full autofocus system otherwise will work in every single video format, as well as when using the HDMI output. The new processing that the Alpha 1 features now enables it to calculate autofocus and auto exposure 120 times a second, which is pretty incredible. During our time with the camera, we used the autofocus a decent amount. Personally, I think it is better than the a7S III and the FX6. It feels much snappier and more responsive. I do wish I had some more time to test them side by side and also test it alongside the R5, as I feel like it's incredibly close to the performance of DAF V2 in the R5, and I really want to see which one comes out on top. When grabbing some headshots of Sam in our studio, the camera did an amazing job of tracking Sam's eye, even with him moving in and out of the key light and moving around the frame. It really is fantastic. I also photographed my partner's rats, and it did manage to catch their eyes a few times, but it wasn't perfect. However, when it did grab their eyes, it did a great job at focusing on the eye and not the whiskers in front of them. Honestly though, the Alpha 1 is a stills camera first and video camera second, and you can see this from the specs. The Alpha 1 is an incredible combination of high resolution and speed, as you can capture the massive 50 megapixel resolution at 30 frames per second in its electronic shutter mode with full autofocus capability. However, how many frames per second you can capture is limited by the lens that you're putting onto the camera, with third-party lenses dropping that burst rate down to 15 frames per second. The 30 FPS drive mode is really only the max it can do, and if you have fast-moving subjects in your frame, this will drop down, which is a shame, but the speed of it is still absolutely insane given the resolution of the imagery that you are capturing. It will also drop down if you switch from lossy compressed RAW to lossless, because these lossless files are much larger. In the high plus burst mode, while capturing both high quality JPEGs and RAWs, the buffer seems to hit 125 and then slow down the capture rate. However, as soon as you start shooting with the buffer at less than 125, the speed is then maxed out again until you hit that 125 buffer limit. If you let the camera write the 425 buffer to the CF Express Type A card, it has the whole lot written in around 13 to 14 seconds, which is really impressive. You can also go into the menu system while the camera is writing. However, you cannot do this when recording video, which is a shame. Sony have also stated that distortion from the electronic shutter has also been improved over the A9 Mark II by 1.5 times. You can still see some jello effect as you whip pan with the camera while shooting, however it performs very well, and if you need to shoot with as minimal distortion as possible, the mechanical shutter is the way to go. In video mode, you can still see some jello, but again it's very well controlled considering the size of the sensor. Sony has also upped the flash sync speed from 1/250th of a second to 1/400th of a second when using the mechanical shutter, which would be great for flash users wanting to freeze their frame. This will only work with modern TTL flash triggers, so older legacy triggers may be limited to 1/250th of a second, but this is something you will have to test yourself. The Alpha 1 also has what Sony are calling Pixel Shift Multi-Shooting Mode. This combines 16 exposures into a 199 megapixel image, which you then process on a computer. In addition to supporting the standard HEIF format, Sony has also added a light version of it and a light JPEG option for smaller file sizes. Of course, this early into a camera's release means that Adobe's Camera Raw does not yet recognize this version of ARW, but Sony's Imaging Edge app does. So although it's not usually how I catalog and edit photos, I did so I could see how the raw files look and perform. From what I can see from the Imaging Edge app, the still image quality is really impressive. You've got so much detail and dynamic range to play with. Naturally, with the Alpha 1's insane burst rate, you can capture a lot of photos very quickly without realizing that you are doing so. I took some photos of my other half's pet rats and managed to rack off around 1500 shots in just 15 minutes. So make sure you have the storage if you're going to shoot in this way. I used to shoot lots of photography with my primary bodies being the 5D3 and 7D. It's honestly incredible how far cameras have come since I did it full time, and the A1 is an incredible stills camera. It is one of the fastest cameras I've ever used. Everything just feels so snappy to operate, and though I'm not at the point of operating Sony Alpha bodies blindfolded like I can with Canon DSLRs, the body and button layout do feel nice to operate. So if you are a professional photographer wanting the pinnacle of mirrorless camera technology, the Alpha 1 currently sits as an incredible option. It combines great autofocus, even in low light, incredible speed, massive resolution, and solid dynamic range and noise performance. The Alpha 1 can actually shoot quite a few different formats, but everything beneath 8K actually lines up with the A7S III almost identically. If you're wanting to capture in 8K, you'll have to use XAVC HS, and this mode has a resolution of 7680 by 4320, while also capturing in 420 10-bit at either 200 megabits a second or 400 megabits a second. This means that a minute of 400 megabits 8K footage will equal about 3 gig, which means you will get roughly 53 minutes of recording on a single 160 gigabyte CF Express Type A card. In this 8K mode, it is oversampling 8.6K's worth of the sensor, and the image looks really great. You can also capture 4K UHD 420 10-bit in the HS mode as well. XAVC SI is also present in the Alpha 1, which you can shoot in both 4K and HD, which are both capturing in 422 10-bit. Like the A7S III, you can shoot in higher frame rates in this mode as well, the maximum being 120 frames per second in 4K and 240 frames per second in HD. However, in the camera's full frame mode, it is pixel binning. In this mode, you can also toggle on an APS-C crop mode. Lastly, you have XAVC-S in both 4K and HD again. You can capture up to 120p in both UHD and HD, however this is only in 420 8-bit. Honestly, I can't see many people shooting in this mode unless you really need smaller file sizes and don't want to shoot in H.265. Otherwise, you're better off using XAVC-SI. It's really good to have the option to shoot in such a large range of formats. And really, you have an option for whatever you want to capture in. However, with H.265 being so prevalent here, I would suggest making sure that your computer can handle this, as some won't very well. When shooting in 4K 120p and 8K, approximately 10% of the angle of view is cropped when shooting in movie mode. The Alpha 1 features a Super 35 mode as well. In this mode, you can capture UHD 4K, which is oversampling a 5.8K portion of the sensor with no pixel binning or line skipping. This Super 35 crop has a crop factor of 1.3 in comparison to full frame. This mode can be toggled on or off or left in an auto mode. From our time in the menus, there are only a few formats that disable this mode in the menu. These are 8K, XAVC-HS 4K 120, XAVC-S 120p in the regular mode, and then XAVC-SI 4K 120p, XAVC-S 4K 120p, and XAVC-HS 4K 120p in the camera slow and quick mode. It is nice to have the option to use this mode if you have some old Super 35 lenses or even new ones that you want to use with it and still get great image quality. Looking at our chart and each codec back to back, Sony has done a really good job with the pixel binned full frame image. It looks good in comparison to the downsampled 8K. The 8K image looks good, but does have a touch of aliasing in the center of frame on the extremely high resolution portion of the Siemens star. The Super 35 formats also look really good, and this will be a fantastic option for people wanting extra reach out of their lenses or to use Super 35 lenses. Seeing as the Alpha 1 only shoots 8K in H.265 420, playback is not going to be great, especially on an 8K timeline. Even my M1 equipped MacBook Pro struggled a bit with the playback of these 8K files in Premiere Pro on a 4K timeline. Though I would be intrigued to see how these perform in Final Cut Pro, but our workflow consists mainly of Premiere and Resolve. So if you're after better playback performance, transcoding it to ProRes or DNX will be the way to go. As expected, the regular H.264 codecs perform better and the intra-frame flavour of XAVC-S plays back incredibly smoothly. The Alpha 1 also features a proxy recording mode that will allow you to record in any of the other larger formats, as well as a much more compressed proxy to a separate card. This may be a good option for people wanting to do an online-offline workflow, especially if you are shooting 8K, which you may need to transcode before getting into a timeline. This way, you can edit using your proxies and then relink once you've transcoded to a better playback format. As well as all these format options, the Alpha 1 can also output 16-bit RAW via the full-size HDMI port to an external recorder. This will output a resolution of 4332 by 2448. And at the time of recording this video, you can't record the 16-bit image, but recorders such as the Ninja 5 from Atomos will allow you to capture either 10 or 12-bit ProRes RAW in a range of frame rates. You can also record any of the internal 4K formats at the same time as recording externally, but not in 8K. However, the unit we had wouldn't work with our Ninja 5, so we couldn't test this, which is a bit of a shame. Hopefully we get a chance to use the Alpha 1 again soon when this is working. As with other Alpha series cameras, you have the ability to switch into slow and quick mode. This allows you to shoot from 1 FPS all the way up to the max frame rates that each resolution can handle that we mentioned earlier. You can switch into this mode by hitting the mode button and then scrolling to it. The Alpha 1 features the same maximum frame rates as the A7S III, however the Alpha 1 is line skipping in these higher frame rates modes. However, the footage still looks really good. As with previous Alpha series cameras, the Alpha 1 features the same in-body image stabilization system that can achieve 5.5 stops of stabilization. In the menu, you can change between 3 different modes: off, steady shot, and active. Steady shot is your regular IBIS that Sony have had in their cameras for a while now. Active mode is designed for video mode and aims to optimize the 5-axis optical image stabilization for handheld video shooting. And this isn't available in the 8K format or in the XAVC-S HD weirdly, but it is when using any other full frame mode or Super 35 mode and format combination. This then crops in on the image by 12.5% and then electronically stabilizes the footage. This does a pretty good job at stabilizing the image, and it could be a good thing to have for some people in camera. The Alpha 1 uses the same media dual card slot as the A7S III, which can take 2 types of media. Each one of the slots is the same and can take either an SD card or a CF Express Type A card. It's awesome to have the option to use either. When it comes to video, there are only a few formats that you need to use the CF Express Type A for, and these are in slow and quick mode and are the 4K All-I 100 and 120 frames per second, as well as the All-I HD 200 and 240 frames per second. However, in the regular frame rate modes and the rest of slow and quick mode, you can get away with either using a V60 or V90 SD card, depending on what format you want. V90 or faster is required for the XAVC-SI formats in the regular mode, V60 or faster is required for XAVC HS 8K, HS 4K, S4K, and UH3 or faster cards are required for XAVC SHD. Our recommendations for media are in the description below. The fact you can record 8K video to a V60 SD card is pretty amazing considering what other 8K systems require. When it comes to what cards you need for stills, this is going to come down to how fast you want your card to buffer and write your images. The faster the card you put in there, the better the camera is going to handle that. So if you want the best experience possible, Civ Express Type A is going to be the way to go. The Alpha 1 features 11 picture profiles instead of 10 in the A7S III. This includes everything you expect from a Sony Alpha line camera, like S-Log2, S-Log3, and a range of HLG options. However, it also includes S-Cinetone, which has been designed as a quick turnaround acquisition look that takes inspiration from the film color found in the Venice with S709 and provides images with a more cinematic look in tone and color for the video world. All we need now is the A7S III to get it to. In S-Cinetone, the base ISO is 125. In S-Log2 and S-Log3, the base ISO is 800, which is different to the 640 of the A7S III. The Alpha 1 also features a time-lapse mode internally, which is called interval shoot function. Within this menu, you can change a range of parameters for shooting time-lapses pretty decently. This is awesome to have, as given its huge resolution and ability to shoot using the same color profiles as the video-centric offerings from Sony, it could make an awesome B camera to cameras like the FX6 or FX9. When it comes to your audio options, it's the same as the A7S III. The Alpha 1 features the same MI shoot, which allows you to use the updated XLR K3M, which when combined with the 3.5mm mic input on the K3M, allows you to capture up to 4 channels of audio. Otherwise, you can use the regular 3.5mm mic in on the camera, but if you want improved audio quality and the ability to use XLR microphones, the K3M is the way to go. With overheating being a hot topic over the past year or so, Sony have stated that the Alpha 1 features a unique heat management system to keep things within their operating temperature range, which results in the ability to record 8K 30p continuously for 30 minutes. However, in the camera's menu system, you can switch between both a standard mode and a high mode. The spec that we mentioned from Sony earlier seems to be in the standard mode. Standard mode limits the recording quite a bit, so all the testing we did was with it in the high mode. When recording the 400 megabits 8K 42010-bit, we managed to have the camera continuously roll for around an hour and 20 minutes before it stopped. However, the recovery times are also fantastic, and a minute of rest to format cards and change the battery then allowed me to record for another hour and 20 minutes. So really, I don't think overheating is going to be an issue with the Alpha 1. And even if it does get a bit hot, it does seem to recover really well, and then allow you to record for another substantial period. Just bear in mind this will most likely put some stress on your camera if you turn this mode on and start shooting for hours on end. Physically, the camera is incredibly similar to the A7S III. However, there are a few changes which clearly tailor it more towards stills. The top looks quite different as you have more physical dials in the A7S III. On the left you have a dial for drive modes and focus modes, which make changing them on the fly much faster than having to go into a menu. The record button on the A7S III is gone, and there are now 2 custom function buttons. The back is almost identical, but you have a record button just next to the viewfinder, which is positioned similarly to the A7S Mark II. The EVF is the same incredible 1.6cm 9.44 million dot one featured on the A7S III, but now this has a refresh rate of 240Hz, which is absolutely insane. Honestly, this is the best electronic viewfinder I've ever used, and I would take this over a traditional optical viewfinder any day of the week now. The Alpha 1 is using the same screen we expect in an Alpha series camera, but is using the old tilt design for its back screen, which was present on previous Alpha series cameras, instead of the fully articulating screen that is featured on the A7S III. Sony has said that this is because of the camera's focus on stills over video. However, I think what really this is going to come down to be personal preference, as there are reasons for people to like both. The left-hand side has all of the I/O, and this features all of the ports that the A7S III comes with, and a couple extra. So you have a gigabit Ethernet port, a flash sync port, a 3.5mm mic in, a 3.5mm headphone out, a full-size HDMI port, a USB-C port, and a micro USB multi-port. The card slots and the mechanism on the right are the same as the A7S III, which you mentioned earlier. At the bottom you have the battery cover, which houses the MPF Z100 battery, which is the same as the A7S III again. When it comes to the battery life, this will depend on the format you choose to record. However, when running our 8K overheating tests, each battery seemed to last around an hour and 20 minutes when continuously recording in this mode, which is pretty good. However, if you really need to roll for a long time, you can either plug the camera into a USB charging device, which will then drain the internal battery much slower, or use a dummy battery with an external battery to power it, which will result in much longer run times. The Alpha 1 also features the same updated menu system as the A7S III did, which is much improved over the previous Alpha menu system. It features pretty much the same layout with the same settings, apart from a couple of additionals for some of the new features. We wanted to see how the Alpha 1 compared to its biggest competition in the R5 and Sony's very popular A7S Mark III. We shot in the Alpha 1's 8K format, the R5's 8K All-I format, and the A7S III's 4K XAVC-SI format, all at 25p. When it comes to underexposure, the Alpha 1 performs very well, with the footage looking good down to 3 stops under. At 4 stops, colour is still held really well, but it does get quite noisy. Even at 5 stops, performance is surprisingly good. When comparing it to the A7S III and the R5, I actually think the Alpha 1 looks the best. The A7S III looks much noisier and colours shift earlier into the stops, and the R5 performs much worse than both of these. This comparison to the A7S III was really surprising. I thought the Alpha 1 wouldn't perform as well as the A7S III here. When it comes to overexposure, the Alpha 1 performs very well up to 4 stops over. My skin is held well, and so is colour. At 5 stops over, you can see skin break and colour begins to shift, but blues are held well. At +6, blues are still held alright, but you can see some saturation loss. When you compare this to the A7S III, performance is very similar, but I think the A7S III handles it maybe a touch better. The R5 performs the worst again out of 3, with good performance up to around 3 stops over. However, at 4 stops over, skin breaks and colours start to shift. At 5 stops, the image becomes pretty much unusable. For our ISO tests, we shot the camera port capped as well as this frame from my local train station. The Alpha 1's max ISO in the video mode is 32,000, which isn't as high as the 409,600 of the A7S III. However, 32,000 is going to be plenty for most people. Unsurprisingly, the higher ISO performance isn't as good as the A7S III, but given the Alpha 1's incredible resolution and reduced photosite size, Sony have done a fantastic job with it performing very well, even up to 12,800 to 25,600 ISO, where some noise reduction in post will give you some really nice imagery. Just note there is no weird dual-based trickery going on here like the A7S III has. The Alpha 1 is Sony really flexing what they can do, and has been compared to Canon's R5 quite a lot online. Both are each brand's flagship mirrorless cameras currently, and are aimed to be the perfect hybrid camera. However, both have compromise in different areas. There have been rumours floating around about Canon releasing a 1D version of their mirrorless system for a while now, which would make more sense to compare to the Alpha 1 too, if and when that comes out. However, the R5 can achieve lots of what the Alpha 1 can, and really what it's going to come down to is what ecosystem you want to buy into. However, the prices are actually quite different, with the Alpha 1 being nearly £2,500 more expensive than the R5. So while the Alpha 1 is incredibly well spec'd, the R5 could cover a lot of boxes if you're okay to compromise in some areas. However, the Alpha 1 ticks so many boxes that an ultimate hybrid camera would need to. It excels in both its stills and video mode and provides some of the best autofocus in any camera I've ever used. It is one of, if not the best and most well-rounded hybrid cameras on the market currently. However, if you're a video shooter looking for an A camera, this price point is seriously contested currently, with the likes of the FX6, Canon C70, Zcam F6 and Komodo all being much better suited for video and cinema productions. However, if you think about what I said at the beginning, where you're taking an A7R4, an A9 Mark II and an A7S III and pushing it into one body, you've got an incredible blend of video and stills performance inside of one body, which is pretty insane for the price point that it's at, and makes the Alpha 1 an easy recommendation if this is what you're after. If you have any more questions, let us know in the comments below, and make sure to hit the subscribe button for more awesome upcoming content. And thank you for watching.